Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Tammy Patzer, and today I'm really excited because our guest is Lana Detro. She is the principal broker for Ala Carte Realty and specializes in REO bank foreclosures. REO means real estate owned. And she started her real estate career in Austin, Texas, but she's originally from Indiana. So Lana and her husband, Ron, returned, and they, along with their 3 children, have been in Indiana ever since. So Lana has a very long list of accomplishments, and she's been very active in the real estate community in Indiana. So she's been the president of the Indiana Association of Independent Real Estate Brokers, chairman of the Downtown Division of MIBOR, executive board for Eastside MIBOR, and sitting member of the Professional Standards Committee. Lana is also a member of MIBOR, the National Association of Realtors, Indiana Association of Realtors, and the National REO Brokers Association. And Lana is also the co-founder of the Default Industry Leaders, a national organization of real estate professionals. She volunteers at the Hancock County Food Pantry and at Indiana Neighborhood Housing Partnership, teaching homeownership to new homebuyers. She's also been nominated for the National Hope Award for her outstanding work with minority buyers. So, welcome, Lana. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Tammy. Thanks for having me on.
This is pretty exciting because being nominated for the National Hope Award for outstanding work with minority buyers is pretty fascinating. And then, of course, just your long list of being active in real estate in the Indianapolis and Indiana area. Tell me, why did you get into the real estate business?
I got into real estate when my husband was transferred to Austin, Texas with his job. And we had a realtor that had been assigned to us down there. At that point in time, I had thought about real estate. My husband and I had not been married very long, and I was looking for something to do. So I decided I could show a home as well as that agent that showed us ours, and maybe even better. So that's how I got into real estate, and it has just grown exponentially since then.
Well, it's interesting how we find ourselves in our careers. Tell me a little bit more about REO and how you got involved in that.
I actually started work down in Austin, Texas with a woman-owned business there. And they were real estate brokers, and quite good ones, in the city of Round Rock, which is just north of Austin. So I didn't really choose REO, it chose me. These particular women had the contract for the VA REOs in the almost whole central Texas area there. So when I went to work for them, I was introduced to foreclosures and evictions through them, and I found it fascinating. You either love REO or you hate it. You either jump full feet into it or you just don't get into it at all and tell your clients, gee, I don't know anything about REO and don't want to show it to you, which is what a lot of agents do. They don't understand it.
So you've been in real estate since the early 90s. So you've seen, let's see, I remember, I believe here in Florida in like 1991, we had a real estate downturn. So it has been up and down and all around since the 90s. So if you look at REO over the time that you've been in real estate, how have you seen it change?
I actually started in real estate in the late 80s, and that's when the S&L scandal was huge down in Texas, especially. It had started down there. So page after page in the newspaper were foreclosures. And I found that fascinating, how that happens, the whole process. And I wanted to learn more and more about it. So I can usually tell when a downturn is coming. It's a cycle, actually, and it's usually a 10-year cycle. It's up, the market peaks, you reach the top, and then it implodes on itself, and foreclosures begin to happen. It's because of the moratoriums that we've had now on evictions and foreclosures that we haven't seen a lot of them on the market. But again, those are just building up in the pipeline. People are still going through foreclosures, but they are not hitting the market as yet. We look to see quite a bit of that happening probably in the second quarter on of 2021.
Oh, so second quarter of 2021, we're in 2021. So you're talking about they could start as soon as April of this year. That there might be some movement.
That's possibly true. The moratorium was just extended through the end of March of this year, but that does not mean that people are not still going through foreclosure process. They are. And some of those properties are leaking through the system. We've gotten several of them recently. Those are mostly ones that don't have people in them, so they do not have to go through an eviction. In December of 2020, the last quarter actually of 2020, the forecast was for over 150,000 evictions in Indiana alone in January of 2021. Those also included rentals, not just residential owned real estate. But the moratorium did put a halt to those. Doesn't mean those 150,000 went away. It means there are more added on top.
Wow. So it's like kind of just waiting for something to happen, because it's almost like the courts would get backlogged, I imagine, with properties sitting there. So you said something that I found interesting. You said it seems to go in 10-year cycles. And so, of course, the last big crash was in between 2007 and 2012 in my mind, because I fought with the bank for that long trying to save my house, and I finally did. But I know a lot of people just walked away, and it takes a long time for these people to recover from losing a house or from foreclosure. So when you work with these REO or bank-owned properties, what do you see as when you do work with them, what do you do if, let's say that somebody does still live there or they have renters? How do you try to move this process forward?
I have always found the best way to do that is to let the people in the home know that you are not the enemy. You are there to try to help them through this process. It's never easy for anyone. It's never easy for me to do. And it's the worst part of my entire job. But I have made it something that I believe I specialize in, and that's building a rapport. We are able to offer them cash for keys, which is a process that they can accept money for moving out of the home and leaving it in what is called broom swept condition. In other words, taking everything out of the home, leaving it without any trash or anything in it. And then the bank does give them cash for keys. It's usually a very generous offer.
Well, that would help somebody to move on if they had enough money to at least go find another place to live. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the Default Industry Leaders organization that you co-founded. Can Can you explain how that came about, the creation of that, and why it's important?
There were a lot of REO type industry, people who were trying to put together organizations for the REO industry. And there were so many of them that they were all different. Nobody really offered a place where you could go and the agents could lay out their ideas and talk freely and know that they had a voice in it as well. Back in 2013, and I say we, Donna Brown, who was the other co-founder, she and I were at a conference in Denver, Colorado. And at that point in time, we realized that what was needed was another organization specializing just in default and having as members of the banks, members of different organizations, the contractors and so forth, where we could all come together and have a platform. And that's how we started out. And we have several members across the country, and our members are vetted. They have to know what they're doing in the REO industry and have a long list of credentials behind their name to be a member.
So the default industry leaders actually has members who are not only realtors, but there's the bankers, mortgage brokers, title company people. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is correct. We have several asset managers. That is what they're called, people in the bank who handle the assets for the lender or the servicer. So we do have those as well.
Those 2013, so it's going on 7 years. So how valuable do you think that this group has become for its members?
I think it's very valuable because with anything in the REO industry right now, you tend to lose interest in things. People go different directions, but we still have a solid core group from across the nation who have stayed members of DIL for that very reason. We offer them a chance to talk about what's coming up in the future. We give them insight, and at the same time, they're keeping their face and their names in front of the banks.
So the relationship between the real estate professionals and the banks is really important because those are the people that have the properties that they need sold. Is that right?
That's right. And they want to make sure whoever's handling those assets for them is knowledgeable and knows exactly what they're doing, no matter what they might face with the home. Several things can happen to the assets while they're under your control, and you have to know the steps to take for any kind of, let's say, the house flooded or even the house caught on fire. All of these are handled in different ways, and you have to know how to do that rather than trying to get a hold of your asset manager in the middle of the night to ask what to do.
So you have to be very professional and educated and very knowledgeable about the real estate and all of the steps and procedures that are involved in this transaction. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about just being an REO real estate professional. Do you have any antidotes or anything that can kind of help people visualize what a day in the life of an REO broker might look like?
There are always things to tell about the industry. Some of them are humorous. Some of them are very sad. Some of them people might even consider scary. I think a lot of even men do not want to go in places that some of us go when we're in the REO industry. But you have to just look at everything. Every morning is a new adventure, and that's exactly what I do. Some of the greatest antidotes, I think, are going to be in a book that's coming out soon, where several of us have gotten together and written what a day in the life of a real estate REO broker looks like. My favorite thing to talk about is the ghosts that inhabit the houses. There are even some ghosts that are put on the titles to the homes. I can think of one in particular where they named the ghost as part of the deed holder. So there are funny things that go on.
So I take it that the people who are going to buy that house are intrigued by that and not scared away from that. Because I think some people would say, I'm not going to buy that house. And then I have people who say, yeah, I'm buying that house.
Exactly. You never know what's going to pique someone's curiosity and get them to buy a home. But yes, you'd be surprised how many people are anxious to move in a home they think a ghost also inhabits.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about, from the perspective of someone who wants to buy an REO or invest in an REO, what is the best way to go about that? Because, for example, if you look on Zillow or something like that, you'll see these houses that might say foreclosure, pre-foreclosure. Do you just call up any old realtor, or how important is it to really work with an REO broker?
It's very important to work with somebody who knows that part of the industry, just like it would be very important to work with somebody who knew, let's say, mountain cabins. You know, you wouldn't want to go to someone who lived in the city to try to find a mountain cabin. It's the same thing with REO. You cannot just go to any agent and ask them, although they are able to sell the homes, most certainly, but they may not have the expertise needed to know exactly what's involved with buying a foreclosed property, or even one that is in pre-foreclosure, which is called a short sale. That's an entirely different transaction and is handled a different way than a foreclosure would be. So it's very important. All of the agents that work for me, work for my company, know exactly how to sell an REO property, and they are experts in that field.
So as you're talking, I was just thinking about all of the different possibilities of with REOs and everything. In the Indiana area, are most of the houses there, are they in the city, or do they have acreage? Would a property with acreage be treated differently than a property that is like in the city?
Well, they aren't treated differently with the transaction, but they are treated differently when you have to handle the property. Something with acreage, you can even get properties that have animals still on them. I just had one that had horses on it. Fortunately, we were able to get the horses a good home, and they are fine. But some people just leave their animals there as well. So every situation is different. You handle each one according to the type of property it is and what is involved in getting that on the market.
So you mentioned that the default industry leaders are all across the United States. Are they only in the United States, or are there any members that are in Canada or someplace else?
No, we only have members here in the United States, not because we're trying to shut anybody else out, but they have different procedures handling their REOs, and we're not familiar with that. So we try to stay with those who can help each other here to understand the process.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about showing these properties. What if an agent wants to show the property, or if they have a buyer for one of your property, what advice would you give them to make it so, number one, that they're meeting all the criteria, but that they actually make it so that maybe their buyer has the potential of actually being the one that gets that property?
There are several little caveats to buying a foreclosure. You have to understand that these are sold as is. They are still allowed, the buyers are still allowed to have inspections on the property, but it does not necessarily mean that what they find is going to be taken care of by the bank. Each servicer is different in what they will do for that home. Several of them want to fix their properties up, want to repair them, put them on the market. And what people need to understand, and especially the buyers that go in, they are not going to get these homes for pennies on the dollar like they used to think that they could back in the crash we talked about before from about 2006 through 10. That was a very deep dive there. And many of the banks were just trying to liquidate what was on their books. And it ended up being almost a pennies on the dollar transaction then. That is not the case any longer. The banks realize what they have. They figure that they can fix up the homes just as well as an investor can and turn around and sell them at market value. And that is what they're doing. So people need to understand that. They are not going to go in there and get everything repaired. They're not going to go in there and make a low offer and get that accepted necessarily. And they need to understand how to put the offers in. Each bank has their own process for putting the offers in, and not all of them take the state purchase agreement as part of that. They have their own forms.
Oh, so there's a lot more to it than just whatever, filling out a standard real estate offer and saying, here you go, and winning. In the Indianapolis area, what is going on in the real estate market now? Is it, I've heard that it's a seller's market right now in a lot of places across the country. What is happening in your neck of the woods?
We're seeing that as well. A lot of homes, if they're priced correctly, are selling very quickly and with multiple offers. However, we've also seen a little bit of a flattening of the market, which means the prices are not going up the way they were. The appraisers are not coming in with the high dollar values that they did for a while. They are being a little more cautious when they are appraising the homes. And I think that is one of the indicators that the market is just a little bit softer than it maybe was in 2020, which actually, even though 2020 was a very bad year for a lot of things, it was exceptionally good for real estate.
Yeah, isn't that is interesting to me, because you would think that with so many lockdowns and everything that there wouldn't be that many people buying houses. Why would you say that 2020 was a good year for buying real estate or for selling real estate?
I'm sorry I'm laughing, but I think a lot of people were bored. They wanted to go out and look at homes, and Indianapolis and Indiana in general considered real estate brokers to be essential workers. So there was never a time that we were locked down. We always were able to work. So people got bored with their homes, I think, thought it was a great time to maybe do that, fix up their home, sell it, and move to something else. And that's why I think we saw all the movement in 2020. It was a very good year. I think there's a song like that.
Interesting. So are most of those deals, were they cash deals, or was it easy to get mortgages? You know, that I've always been a little confused about mortgages now ever since the crash, you know, from the mid 2000s, if people are just buying things for cash, or if because interest rates are so low, they're able to, you know, still get good deals on mortgages.
The interest rates are extremely low right now. I'm not sure that's going to continue. It's based on, you know, there are unknowns right now. So it's a little tentative. We've seen a little rise in prices, a little bit of a jump in those points that are having to be paid on the mortgages. Even though the rates are low, there are some upfront points that they're charging to get those low rates now. And so we are seeing movement there. We're also seeing the appraisers, like I said, come in a little bit lower than they were coming in. But yes, mortgages, they can still get mortgages.
So why do you think that is that they're being more conservative on that? Are they expecting something or preparing for something and being more conservative What typically causes that?
I can only talk about my experience in it. Of course, we can never predict what's going to happen. But I think there's always a vibration going on when they feel something going on. If you continue to come in with high appraisal values, you are going to cause the bubble. I think we've seen this so much in the California market and the West Coast market in general, where the values just keep increasing because of a perceived value. And all of a sudden, they get to the point where people can only afford to do an interest-only loan. The principal is never touched. They're only paying interest the entire time. And you can't keep on like that forever unless you're just going to rent that home rather than ever owning it. So there does tend to be a bubble when those prices go up.
So here we are, it's 2021. And of course, we don't know when the pandemic is going to end, or will they keep pushing these moratoriums, or is there a point where they just can't do that anymore, on the foreclosures and on the rentals? Because they've moved it now. It was January, and then you said it was March, and then I've heard somebody say September. Is there a point where they can't do that anymore?
In my own personal opinion, I believe we're at that point. I know a lot of economists are now getting involved in this as well and warning against continuing these moratoriums. You cannot withhold money from landlords who are still having to pay their mortgages, still having to take care of and repair those rentals. You cannot continue to ask banks not to get any return on their investment. The whole economy actually is based on what's going on in the real estate market.
On movement. So that's something it sounds like if you are interested in real estate or investing or even buying a home, you need to pay attention to all of the economics, I guess, going on in the country, because it's interesting. I did have one question that came to my mind. And I've never been to Indiana or Indianapolis, so I don't know. But I've heard that many people are actually moving out of cities to smaller locations. So in your area, would that mean that people are leaving Indianapolis area? Or are they coming to Indianapolis from bigger areas?
I think we see a lot of people coming here, because we offer, the hometown feel, actually, and it's a huge city. Indianapolis is huge, but you would not know that by just coming into the city itself. We have lower taxes here. We offer so much, and people are wanting that feel. I think it's a comforting feel to them. So I don't believe we're losing people from Indianapolis or even Indiana. People still like to go out to the rural areas, which we have a lot of in Indiana. But Indiana is a great state to live in.
Interesting, because, I was wondering about that, because they were talking about, for example, San Francisco is actually having an exodus, versus other places in the country. And there's just different things. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your volunteerism. And I know that the Default Industry Leaders also have some charitable causes. Can you tell me a little bit more about why that's important to you?
I've always believed that what you give is what you get back. And I try to give because I've been extremely blessed in my life. It seems like nothing has been an accident. I couldn't say, I just stumbled into REO, or I just stumbled into real estate. I think everything is laid out, and I like to return what I've given it. I believe everybody in Default Industry Leaders feels the same way. We have given to warrior dogs, which are dogs that are trained and given to soldiers who have suffered in the wars as a companion. So Warrior Dogs is a big foundation that we give to. We also give to Wounded Warriors. We give to several abusive centers for women who have been abused. We give to a lot of homeless shelters. So as a whole, we are trying to give back to the community in the best way that we can and in any way that we can.
Well, that sounds like a really good thing. Can you talk a little bit more about the creation of your relationships with banks and asset managers as a default industry leader?
I can tell you that started, years ago, of course, where I was doing BPOs for banks. And a BPO is a broker price opinion. And that was when they wanted to know what their properties were worth. And probably these homes were going into foreclosure. So I started doing that down in Texas when I was introduced to REO. I came up here to Indiana, and it was a fairly new concept up here. And that was in the early 90s when I moved back up to Indiana. People did not know about doing a BPO or a comparative market analysis at that point. So some of the banks I worked for in Texas knew I had moved to Indiana and had me do BPOs up here, which later led to being able to handle their assets, not only as short sales, but also when they went into becoming an asset for the bank and being able to liquidate those for them.
Wow. So just the fact that you did the BPOs, because I know a lot of people, a lot of real estate professionals don't like to do those because they're a lot of work. So it sounds like being an REO broker is a lot of work. Would you say that there's more work involved in REO than in general real estate?
Yes, a lot more work involved. It used to make me laugh, and I still do, when people think that all we do is just put a sign in the front yard and sit back and wait for it to sell. Actually, we take care of the property from cradle to grave. When it first becomes an asset for the bank, we are assigned that property, and we oversee it. We oversee it when it's trashed out. We oversee it when the repairs are made. We oversee it when it goes on the market, and then as through the closing, and then even after closing. So we are responsible for all of that. We visit every asset at least once a week, taking full pictures, full reports for the bank. So it's constantly reports, and if something is stolen, something is broken, there's an insurance claim, that's a whole nother process. So thankfully, I have women on my staff, on my team, who are very familiar with this, and the men as well. Of course, the men. Many of them are, that's all they do is do REO. But a lot of them do traditional, and that has gotten them through 2020 when we saw just mainly traditional real estate being done.
Wow. It does sound like an awful lot of work. And just from the fact that I've talked to you a little bit before this, I know how dedicated everyone is. You've won some different awards. Tell me a little bit more about that National Hope Award.
I was nominated for that back in the early 2000s, I believe. And you have to be nominated by your board. So I was nominated by MIBOR, which is Metropolitan Indianapolis Board of Realtors, to represent for that National Hope Award, the Indiana area. I was very honored with that, and it was for my work with minority buyers, which I still am very thankful I am able to do. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I want to make sure everyone gets a home who deserves one and wants one, and that's my goal when I do real estate.
Well, I definitely would want you on my side. If somebody wants to reach out to you and ask you some questions or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way would be to send me an email or a text, and they can email me at lana@alacarterealty.com, which is ALACARTEREALTY.com. Or they can text me 317-509-6797.
Since you said the name of your company, I just have to ask, how did you come up with that name, Ala Carte Realty?
Ala carte is picking and choosing different services that a company might have. We have, of course, different things that we do. We have some of our brokers who do commercial real estate. We have some who do traditional. All of them are trained in REO. We also offer different ways of doing real estate. And that really worked well for us back when we opened the business, because we allowed the client to choose which of our services they wanted and how much of our service they wanted, whether they wanted open houses, whether they wanted us to do flyers, what kind of advertising they want. That all determined how we based our commission rate at that point in time.
Oh, that's interesting. You mentioned commercial. Is there a REO market in the commercial side of things?
Absolutely. Yes. Those buildings go into foreclosure just like homes do. And that's another hallmark of knowing when something is coming. We're seeing a lot of the commercial properties go into foreclosure.
Wow. So looking, into the future, you said that the moratoriums were in through March, but then you said that some of the information came out that things might start moving in the second quarter of 2021. How long does it normally take to see these trends, show some kind of direction in terms of do you think that it's ever going to be as bad as it was in 2007 to 2010 with the, the way everything just imploded?
The way our economy is looking right now, and what the economists are warning of, is that we could see that again. Those are just people's opinions. It's not a foreshadowing of things to come. But back to the commercial buildings, because so many have been forced to work at home, those commercial buildings have been sitting empty, which means that whoever owns those buildings, they are not collecting any rent, any money at all on those buildings. People have moved out of them and moved into their home. There's even the thought that perhaps that is the new way of doing business, just being in your home, doing Zoom calls and things like that, rather than having a brick and mortar place to go to every day. So yes, we see things begin to move. And one thing, it's just like dominoes. It's a domino effect. If one thing moves, it can cause the next thing to move, and the next thing, and the next. So will it be as bad? I don't know how many homes are sitting right now, but I see those homes sitting, and I'm sure a lot of people do. So we can only wait and see how everyone decides to dispose of their assets. Sometimes they're sold to big hedge funds, which then they have to do something with them as well. The property's there. How's it going to be disposed of?
Wow. Yeah, there's just, I guess, a lot of unknowns right now with real estate. But I think that when you were talking about the commercial, that is something that I don't know that there's been a lot of focus on that side. Not in my mind until you said that. And I'm saying, oh my goodness, you're absolutely right. You don't realize how if nobody's going to work and they're just staying home, then what does happen to that commercial property if there isn't any rent coming in? There has to be something does happen. And like you said, I guess it goes into foreclosure or has to be sold off. So that's something interesting, because I know here where I live, you can actually see properties that were in the middle of being built and they're just stopped. And then they become eyesores, because here in Florida, it's like the jungle takes over and things just overgrow these different places. So before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to add?
I would just encourage people to, at this point in time, do as much as they can to help their neighbors. If they know somebody who is struggling, there are different programs out there for people who cannot pay their rent, people who cannot make their mortgages. Some of those did not work when they were offered back in 2008 and 2009. They really did not work. But they've honed those now, and there are different options for people. So I believe that if we help one another, we can avert a huge crisis like we saw before. But if not, we need to know what we're dealing with when we go into this market and how it affects all of us when that happens.
Oh, thank you so much. So everyone, we've been speaking with Lana Detro at Ala Carte Realty, and she's also the co-founder of the Default Industries Leaders. And as you can hear, she's definitely a real estate expert. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on today, Tammy. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Everyone, this is Tammy Patzer. Go make it a beautiful day.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.